Hey everybody, it's Tony Turbyville with Platinum Benefit Services, making another educational video to try to help the process be smoother for everybody involved. And today we're going to talk about asset limits for single people and also for an applicant who has a spouse that lives in the community. Now we'll touch on both spouses applying in one section here, but for the most part we're talking about a single applicant, no spouse, or an applicant and a spouse living in the community. Okay, we're not trying to get into what all types of assets count and what types don't. We're just telling you, showing you how the determination of value for qualification happens. Okay, what types count and what types don't count is for another video. Alright, so it's real important that you understand the difference between countable and excludable assets. So countable assets are pretty much just what they sound like. They count when you're determining whether somebody's eligible for Medicaid. Here's the limits. In 2002, a person can have $2,000 if their income is greater than $945. Okay, so if it's less than 945, it's another number we'll show you in just a second. But if their gross income is 945 or greater, individual applicant. It is $3,000 if it is both a husband and a wife applying for benefits together. This is the one time during this presentation we'll touch on that scenario. In that scenario, if the couple has $1,278 or greater in gross combined income, then they can have $3,000 together. Okay, if the individual has less than $945 in monthly gross income, then they can have $5,000 instead of $2,000. If it is a couple, and that says $1,279, but it should really be $1,278 gross income or less, and both are applying, then they can have $5,000 in assets. Now let's look at excludable assets. Excludable assets are what they sound like. They're excluded for determining eligibility. So countable counts for determining eligibility. Excludable does not count, but excludable is actually broken into two categories. One is non-countable assets and one is exempt assets. Now the difference is that non-countable assets can be recovered from by Medicaid if they go through probate. So non-countable can be recovered from, but exempt assets they cannot be recovered from. Again, for another video, but just so you understand, countable counts, excludable does not. Excludable is in two categories, non-countable and exempt. Non-countable can be collected from in probate, exempt cannot. So during the application process, here's how the assets have to break down. If it's an individual applying for Medicaid, it's $2,000 is the asset limit. Now we had the $5,000 a couple slides ago, but we're going to assume most people have income over $945. So we're going to say it's $2,000 for simplicity. And their spouse, if they're married, can have $130,380. So that's both, right? So they can have $2,000 for the individual, $133.80. So you can really, as a couple, you can have $132,380 of countable assets. Okay. Now, the bank account, when they look at a bank account, you can deduct from the bank account a number of items, which we'll get into in just a minute. But the lowest bank balance is what you work from. So if you have 22 working days that shows a balance on the bank statement, that running balance, right? Money goes in, money comes out every day, there's an ending balance. That ending balance, the lowest ending balance for the calendar month, is the one that you can use for deducting from these other things that we're going to show you can take out. So for one, income doesn't count the month in which it's received. If it's electronically deposited, it does not count. So there's also certain assets that can be temporarily or even permanently excluded, and they don't count. They're deducted from that lowest bank balance, right? A tax refund. So if you got $5,000 tax refund, that $5,000 does not count for a period of 12 months from the time you receive it. So you can literally deduct that $5,000 from the lowest bank balance, and Medicaid is okay with that because it doesn't count. You got to deduct it. If you sold the primary residence, that primary residence, the proceeds from it are not countable for 90 days from the time of the sale, and it's really the first of the month following 90 days from the time of the sale. So let's say the sale happens April 15th, rough numbers, May 15th, June 15th, July 15th, somewhere around in there is 90 days, but the first of the month after that would be August 1st. So the money would not count until that time frame ran out. So you would be able to deduct any proceeds on the sale of a house from the lowest balance. Government disaster relief, most commonly thought of right now is COVID funds, but there are other types, they don't count. And there are a few other exceptions, but these three prior will cover 99.9% of whatever you'll run into. All right. Remember, income doesn't count as an asset the month it's deposited. So let's take an example, a scenario. Let's say it's March. This person is going to be eligible, and we're going to run through a scenario on numbers so you can see. They have a $2,000 bank balance, okay? And we're talking about a countable bank balance. What's their limit? $2,000. Are they within it? Yes, they are, okay? Income comes in. Let's say $3,000 of income comes in that month, so now they have a total bank balance of $5,000. But they do not have a countable bank balance of $5,000. Why? Because we said the income doesn't count in the month in which it comes in, as long as it's electronically deposited. So that total bank balance of $5,000 doesn't apply to us. What applies is the $2,000, the countable balance. The income didn't credit for calculation purposes of eligibility. So we got $2,000 that counts. All right. Now, let's suppose for a moment that Joe is married. He's married to Martha. She can have $130,380. She has $1,720 come in. That's $132 total balance, but not the balance we use because we're going to back out the income, right? $132,000 goes away. There's $130,380 left. He's within his limit. She's within her limit, so Joe is in fact eligible. Now, let's go to April, and let's make them ineligible and help understand some things walking through that. We have the same $2,000 countable asset balance. We have the same $3,000 in income, but hang on, this income came from last month. It went into the bank last month, and they never spent it. Okay, so now it's an asset, and it counts. It rolled from an income to an asset on the first of the month after it was received. Now they got a tax refund of $1,000, and they got this month's income that was deposited for $3,000. So we got a total bank balance of $9,000, but that's not the balance we're going to use to determine. The lowest bank balance, $2,000, we started with. Last month's income, it counts, right, because it rolled over, but the tax refund, it doesn't count, and this month's income doesn't count. So for determining eligibility, we don't have a $9,000 balance. We have a $5,000 balance. Well, how much can we have? $2,000, right? So he's still not eligible, but I wanted to distinguish between countable and non-countable in the bank account. Now let's look at Martha. Joe's married, his community spouse, $130,380. She got $1,720 in income last month. Let's say she didn't spend it. So now she also got a $45,000 proceed from the sale of their mobile home. Okay, income got deposited of $1,720 this month, which gives us a total asset or bank balance of $198,820. But we got things that don't count, things that do. Does last month's income that rolled over count? Yes, it does. So we leave it in place. Does the sale of the house? No, because we just got it this month. It's excluded for at least 90 days, right? So the income that was deposited this month does not count. We can take it off. And so our $198,000 balance goes away and we have $132,100. What can they have? $130,380. That's what Martha can have. She's over, so Joe is not eligible based on he's got too much assets and she's got too much assets. So hopefully you can see the point here that I'm trying to make. All right, now also we have to talk about a personal needs allowance. Personal needs allowance is $130 that every applicant gets on long-term care Medicaid. So the problem is that $130 a month will often accumulate in a patient trust account or in the regular checking or savings of the applicant. This is particularly true when it's a single person, no spouse, right? The legal representative's not paying attention. Money accumulates in the trust account, checking account, or savings account, and it will ultimately make the person ineligible if the balance in those accounts gets too large. So let's take a quick look at how that might shake out. Let's say we're after approval, right? So Joe's approved. He's now getting his $130 a month. Let's just, for simplicity, say it's going in the nursing home trust account. Let's say that Joe, for safety, we would always encourage him to get it well under $2,000, and so he did $1,200. And he's had that balance and he's been keeping that, but they forgot about the $130 a month. Okay, $130 a month for 7 months would be $910. Now remember, that last month, that 7th month, doesn't become an asset until it rolls over into the 8th month. But on the 8th month, after approval, accumulating that $130 a month, $1,200 plus $910 is $2,110, which would make Joe ineligible. He was on Medicaid. He had been getting Medicaid for the last 7 months, but now the 8th month rolls around, he's ineligible. Now, if we get the asset out in time, right before the end of the month, then he may never lose his ineligibility, but certainly if he rolls to the 9th month, we're going to have to reapply for benefits. All right. Now let's look at countable assets for Martha, Joe's community spouse. Let's say she won the lotto for $1 million. Is that going to affect Joe's eligibility? And the answer is, if she won that $1 million after Joe was approved for Medicaid, then no, it is not going to interfere with his Medicaid. Even though she's going to have a countable bank balance of $1,130,380, Joe can still be on Medicaid. Okay? So Joe's eligible even though spouse has all this much money if he didn't accumulate too much in his patient trust account. Okay? So I kind of mixed two scenarios there, and I hope you caught that. We're looking at Joe individually, where he could have made himself ineligible by having too much money. Then we looked at Joe and Martha as a community spouse, and what would happen if Martha won the lotto, which is separate from the left side of the screen. Okay, hope you got that. Now, here's the key. After approval, the community spouse's assets just don't count. There's a couple scenarios where it can, right, where Joe loses his Medicaid because he let the 130 get too big. Now we got to go requalify. Martha's $1 million is going to count. The other way it can count is if Martha herself needs Medicaid benefits, then we're going to have to count the $1 million. Okay? So the applicant's countable assets always count while they're on Medicaid. The community spouses does not count after approval. So key takeaways. The bank account, you're looking at the bank account, you use the lowest balance of the month, and from that you deduct anything else that's allowed to be deducted. The income that comes in from direct deposit does not count in the month that's received, but it does count the following month. Assets that are temporarily or permanently excluded do not count until the first of the month following the month temporary exclusion ends. Applicants' countable assets always matter. While they're on Medicaid, the countable asset limits always apply. They always matter. But the community spouse's assets don't matter after Medicaid approval unless we have to reapply for the person in the nursing home because they lost benefits, or the community spouse also needs to apply for Medicaid for themselves. Okay, I hope that helps you understand how we look at bank account balances when we're determining initial eligibility and ongoing eligibility, like at your annual review. If you have any questions, please feel free to call your Medicaid advocate. We hope this was helpful, and remember, none of this is legal advice. You should consult an attorney for any legal advice. This is for educational purposes only. Thank you.